Good evening. I'd like to welcome everybody to this debate between the candidates this year in the 52nd House District, which includes Somers and Stafford. My name is Ralph Williams. I'll be your moderator this evening. First of all, I'd like to thank a number of students from Somers High School who've come out tonight to assist us with both gathering questions and timing the event. Aiden Devine Balarchin, Britt Felch, Sean Gentlecore, Nate Mayhew, Serena Robidoux, Cameron Tuttle, and Christopher Uyar. The students are collecting questions at the table back by the door from the audience to be posed to the candidates. So if you haven't already and you have something on your mind, I'd ask you to go back there and get a slip and fill it out. Our candidates were to pick out of a container to determine who was going first, second, and third. Have you done that yet? Or?
Yes.
Okay. Each candidate will have an opening statement of 3 minutes, no more than 3 minutes. They then will field questions, which I'm winnowing through and picking out to ask them, for which they will have a total of 20 minutes to answer you. If they want to get long-winded on one, it's going to cost them later. We have 3 student timers in the front row, one assigned to each of the candidates, each equipped with a stopwatch. They're going to let the candidates know when there are 10 minutes left?
5.
5 minutes. Okay, fine. I'm sure they'd be grateful if you wanted to give them a magic 10 just to let them know when they're at their halfway point. A yellow card will go up when there's 5 minutes left. A red card will go up when there's 1 minute left. And after that, you're done. Okay. And at the end, each of the candidates will have up to 3 minutes for a summation. I'd like to introduce the candidates in a very non-discriminatory alphabetical order. Linda Louise Lacasse from Somers, who's running as a petitioning candidate. Kurt Bale from Stafford, Republican. And David Walsh from Stafford. So what was the order you guys settled on?
1, 2, 3. Yeah.
Okay. 3 minutes. Sorry. And let them know when they've used up their 3 minutes on this one, too.
President Reagan said the 9 most dangerous words are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
Is that much fun,
Can you hear me? President Reagan said the 9 most dangerous words were, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. And I know District 52 has some really great people that need help and want to be helpers. And there are many volunteers in our community. And I am running because I love my country, I love my state, and I love Stafford and Somers. With my association in the American Legion Auxiliary, I've spent a lot of time in Stafford, Connecticut. So just because I live in Somers, don't let that fool you. I have a lot of relationships in this room presently from Somers and Stafford, and it would be my pleasure to represent you. When people ask me what I can do for them, I turn the question around and I say, what can I do for you? Because I'm not a mind reader, so obviously if I don't know what the people want, then I'm not going to do my job as a representative. So with that said and done, I am here. This is my 3rd time, and I want to say thank you to all the citizens of Stafford. 145 of you voted for me in 2016. And you know what Winston Churchill said? Never, 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 never give up. And for all the young people that are helping tonight, that's my message to you. When you know that you have the talent and the skill to make things happen, it might take the people around you a little while, maybe 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, this is my 5th year, for people to know that I mean business and I will work full-time for you. Thank you. God bless.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Good evening. I'd like to welcome you all here tonight. A special thanks to the students and to our moderator for agreeing to serve. I've been involved in politics almost my whole adult life. 10 years as a university student continuously, 41 years teaching at the State University, and then a lifetime of work as a political activist and sort of a participant. And during that time, I've developed a belief in two core values about politics. One, that politics should be about solving problems for constituents, ordinary people. Of course, there's a choice element here, and the choice element is which problems do you address your attention to. But once that's been decided, everybody should get on board and serve in the policy process to do the best they can for their neighbors. Second thing I've always believed in is that political activity is enormously important. When you get into this kind of activity, you deserve to give your absolute best. And that means working until the job is done, and certainly serving using all of your skills and abilities to be successful. Now, I'm sure, like many of you in the audience, you've been appalled by what's going on in Hartford in the last couple of years. We're in a situation of bitter partisan politics. We're in a situation of really political deadlock, where nobody seems to have a key for moving forward. And most seriously for us, probably, is the fact that the policies that would help us are not being developed by either side. The blame resides with both the Republicans and the Democrats. And I think you can make a good case for saying that, you know, they need a good house cleaning there. I've had concern for the state of Connecticut as a whole in the last couple of years, but my concern about my own constituents, my own towns, really reached a high point last winter when between December and April, the state chose to freeze, sequester, whatever word you want to use for it, $1.2 million of state funding that was supposed to come to Stafford. And at the same time, here in Somers, they did the same thing. They sequestered $1.1 million. Now, that's a huge chunk. If we look at state aid, however, as a whole, we realize how vital it is. State aid total in Stafford is over $11 million. And in Somers, it's about $9.5 million. Considering the size of the budgets, that's over a quarter of the budget. And the questions we had during all of this period is, why is it happening? How many dollars are they going to take? How long is this sequestering going to go on? Will we get any of it back before the end of the session? And then finally, because we were there to meet on the Board of Finance to develop a budget for next year, we were unsure, what do we do now? What is next year going to look like? Well, during all of that time, unfortunately, we didn't get any real guidance. And in that sense, I was disappointed in both of my representatives in that they never appeared once before the Board of Finance. They never sent us a letter. They never gave us an explanation. They never told us anything about what to do. That's the end? Yeah. Okay, sorry.
Mr. Vail.
Thank you. I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. I'd like to thank Bud Moore for securing the town hall and Ralph Williams for serving as our moderator. Thank you. I want to give a special shout out to the students who volunteered tonight. Thank you very much. It's always encouraging to see young people take some engagement in the political process, so thank you very much for coming out and helping us this evening. I'll start off with a little bit about myself. I was born and raised in Stafford, as were both my parents. And my parents instilled in me the importance of being active and helpful in the community. I have 4 children, Hannah, who is a sophomore in college, Noah, who's a senior in high school, Sarah, who's in 8th grade, and Vivian, who's in 3rd grade. Their future and the future of all these students is a big reason why I decided to run for office. It's been my great honor and privilege to serve as your state representative the last 4 years. With very little political experience before taking office, I came into the position with an open mind and a clean slate, and I believe that served me well. Because I did not have an agenda when I entered office, I've been able to focus on the issues that are important to my constituents. My only agenda is to serve the great towns of Stafford and Somers. I've worked hard with local businesses in Stafford and Somers to be sure they can remain in our towns. For example, I worked with 2 local businesses that needed changes in regulations so that they could prosper and grow, and I helped make that happen. I've been on the forefront of the Crumbling Foundation's issue, and I plan on keep working for all homeowners who have been victims. I'm a proven fighter. I've faced off against the largest insurance companies, lobbyists, and Hartford bureaucrats over this issue. In addition to the constituent work, I've worked hard to protect the statutory grant funding that comes into our towns, which my opponent had mentioned earlier. As you know, the state has faced billion-dollar deficits. We overspend. We have too much waste. We have pensions and health cares that are not sustainable. Every city and town saw cuts to their funding. Every city and town. And these cuts were a result of poor decisions made by the governor and the majority party. We cannot continue down this path. To protect our town aid, we have to restructure state government. I will work to do that. And finally, we need to bring predictability and stability to government. To attract business, we need to have a balanced budget to end billion-dollar deficits and policies that allow businesses and our towns to plan and prepare for the future. I'm looking forward to talking more specifically about the issues. And thank you.
Well, the first question I'd like to pose to the three of you, sort of distilling from a few of them in the submitted from the audience, is about the state budget. Clearly, Connecticut has an underfunded pension problem, which results in large part from a decade and more of simply having deferred contributions. And at least two of you have what I would call a truly vested interest in the matter. One of you is already drawing a state pension, Mr. Walsh, and you, I would think, between your time as a correction officer and a legislator, stand to be vested by now. So the question is, what is fair to the citizens who are being asked to either come up with this money or do with fewer services, the state employees and retirees who have put in their time with the understanding that they were going to have this, and of course, I don't know about the regular state employees, but certainly for teachers, don't have Social Security withheld, so they don't have something else to fall back on. How would you balance all of these concerns in a way that would not leave taxpayers unduly burdened and not leave state employees and public employees in jeopardy about their retirements? I'll begin with Linda.
That was written on one of those little pieces of paper?
I was written in about three of them put together. I reserve the right to make stew if you give me the ingredients.
Mr. Williams, it starts with the gentleman next to me, because I was 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
Oh, okay. Want to do it in rotation?
Yeah.
Tag, you're in.
This is a crucial question, and let's begin by telling the truth. Okay, there's two elements of the truth here. The first one is the pensions for teachers and state employees will have to be paid because they're contracts legally implemented by the legislature and the governor over a period of 5 decades. They were the state of Connecticut. When they approved those things in public and signed up on those contracts, that made them law. And the U.S. Constitution defends contracts. Any litigation would not begin in Connecticut courts, it would begin in federal courts, and the state would lose if it tried to renege on the agreements. The pressure that we're feeling now is the result of not 1 decade of non-payment. It's a result of 4 or 5 decades. From 1939 until 1982, the state of Connecticut did not contribute 1 dime to the state pension system. All they took was 2% from each active worker, and that money was used to pay for only the people who were retired that year, taken from the general fund. Complete irresponsibility. Now, the pressure we feel is in part due to a rule that Governor Weicker introduced in the budget when the income tax came in 1991. And that agreement was that somehow by 2032, all of the pensions were supposed to be 100% funded, the teachers and the state employees. Of course, it's impossible. They're already working on several measures to reduce this problem. I would just tell you 3 of them. Number 1, they've already re-amortized the debt so that it's going to be extended now another 16 years. And the lawyers who are negotiating this tell me that it will be also extended for 20 more. Number 2, there's a plan in place, and there's serious consideration of offering buyouts to both teachers and state employees, just as they do in the private sector. Now, that would have to be voluntary, it would have to be approved courts and by the unions, but it is another way of possibly escaping from this. And the third thing is that if we look at the state economy, it's coming back. If we could stop the negativism and the attacks on Connecticut and its future, you would see that the tax returns would start to improve, would start to increase drastically. And that's really what we need. We need to face the problem honestly, we need new sources of income, and we need the possibility of somehow getting some of the people out of the system. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'm a firm believer that we should honor the contracts that are in place. I don't think if someone did their time with the state and they were under a certain assumption that they were going to receive a specific benefit, that they should receive that benefit. I think that we definitely have to look at restructuring the benefits for new hires, looking to go to a 401k type of system where the state would match some money, you know, a defined contribution as opposed to a defined benefit. There's actually over 1,400 state employees that have retirements that are over $100,000 a year. That's too much. Those employees aren't your correction officers, your highway workers, your DMV workers. They're upper level management. And I think that's where we really need to look. You know, the first people that always come under fire are the union people doing the work on the ground. And I think we need to look at it from a different direction. I think we need to thin out the state government from the top down. There's a lot of bureaucrats that are very safe in their job. Every commissioner has 3 deputy commissioners making a ridiculous amount of money. So I think that's where we need to start. I know when we laid off 90 employees from the Department of Labor because our unemployment numbers went down, that they laid off 90 employees and they didn't lay off any management. So how do you lose 90 employees and keep all that management? It doesn't make sense. And I'm on the labor committee. I get to sit on that hearing, and I asked Ben Barnes, you know, that question, and he just said, we like management. That was his answer. I have that clip on CTN if you want to see it. So again, I think we should look at maybe capping the retirements. I personally don't have a problem that Gino Auriemma makes a lot of money, brings a lot of money into this state, but I don't think his retirement needs to be, you know, based on history best years in here. So these are things we have to look at, and again, I just want to start from the top down. Thank you.
Thank you. That's an excellent question. And there are many ways we can handle this. Number one, all the new public employees that are coming in, FYI, even if they don't have defined pension plans and the restructuring does take place, we the people won't experience the benefits of that until 30 years down the road. Okay, so we're in the crisis presently. So what do we do with this crisis? What is even more telling is that the public employees getting their handsome benefits and retirement package plans that have been defined, in spite of that, they're moving out. They're moving out of the state because their pension plans are being taxed. So they have no choice. So we're getting double jeopardy. We're getting people who are getting retirement plans that are unfunded, and they're moving out because they can't pay the property tax, their Social Security is being taxed, their pensions are being taxed. So what do we do to actually solve the problem? That is the question. We have the incumbent who's been representing us for 4 years. I too can testify, being at selectmen meetings, and both our representatives, Mr. Vail and Mr. Kissel, didn't show up. Now I'm finding out Mr. Vail and Mr. Tomey didn't show up in Stafford. So that's a problem. When we have a problem, we need our representatives there, present, on the spot. With social media, yours truly will be on the spot every time of the day. 1-800-US-LINDA, you can ask me a question. I'm not going to be hiding in the mountains. I'm right on Main Street, USA. So what do we do now to address this crisis? We have to look at OPM, Office of Policy Management. And they are giving grants away like nobody's business. It's a waterfall of grants going to this group, to that group, to this group. as Mr. Vail must be able to know that, this has to stop. I can't buy things if I don't have money to pay for my debts. That's why my husband, we don't have credit card debt. We buy what we can afford, and we drive old cars, and our mortgage is almost paid. So I speak from a position of authority because I can identify with a crisis. And when my husband was on the battlefield, I needed to prepare that he might not come back. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. How do you like that?
On another question of what the state needs to or can afford to do, besides deferring pension contributions for the years, we've deferred quite a lot of infrastructure improvements, to the point where we have roads and bridges, if not quite Mayanas Bridge condition, of considerable concern. What approach would you take in light of the obligations you already have to fund retirement for state employees and teachers adequately? What steps would you take to make sure that there's enough money to make sure that we have workable roads and tolerable infrastructure in general? And I'll piggyback to that. How do you feel about using electronic tolls as a means to fund that? Starting with you, Mr. Vail.
Thank you. We generate a lot of money through our gas tax and other revenues that are supposed to be earmarked for transportation issues. And sometimes that money over the years has been taken out of the special transportation fund to help balance the budget, and that's part of the problem. They've tried to create a lockbox, which realistically you shouldn't have to create a lockbox. If the money was meant to put there and comes from those revenues, that's where it should go. But the lockbox always has, holes at the bottom of it. There's always a catch. They call it a fancy little name, a lockbox, but it doesn't accomplish that task. So if we actually took the money at hand that we had to spend on infrastructure, there'd be much more money there to do that. And it also, it costs a lot more in Connecticut to build and pave roads. It's over twice the national average. We're one of the top 10 in the country on how much money we spend per mile to fix roads. So that's something that's part of the problem as well. As far as electronic tolls, I do not support electronic tolls, and I will tell you why. When the only proposal that's in front of the legislature, that's been in front of the legislature, is the electronic tolls. 78 gantries. Those are the things that go over the top of the road that you see on the Mass Pike now, and you just fly through. If you have a easy pass, you go through, it takes it out. They propose putting 78 in Connecticut. And none on the border. You cannot have border tolls. That goes against federal law. And so that would generate $900 million of revenue a year based on this study from the Department of Transportation. Of that, 70% of that would be paid by in-state drivers, meaning that's another $630 million from taxpayers' pockets that they would pay to drive on our roads here in Connecticut. That's based on statistics from the Department of Transportation that was presented to us, and it's the only proposal we've had in front of us. So right now we have a gas tax that's the 6th highest in the state, in the country. We have a 25% flat tax and an 8% gross receipts tax that goes on to wholesale. Overall it's 43 cents a gallon extra. Each penny of that is about $15 million, so that generates over $600 million of revenue. If we want to have a serious conversation about tolls, then I want to have a serious conversation about eliminating at least the substantial amount of that gas tax, at least 25 cents. And then you're going to gain something there when we would be able to gain that revenue from the out-of-state drivers, because people certainly aren't coming here to buy gas. So at this point, I do not support tolls. I have no plans of supporting tolls in the future unless there's a serious proposal put in front of us that makes sense without wasting more taxpayer dollars. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda Ruiz?
If you haven't noticed, I'm from Boston with my Boston accent. Massachusetts got rid of the tolls. There must be a reason. The governor was given $10 million to do a study. Just look around. It doesn't work. And that would be such a burden on the 70% of us that would be paying the lion's share. Right now, our gas tax, he said we're sixth in the country. My notes say that we're the highest out of 50 states. So I don't know who the other six are that bring us to six, and we're not number one, but that's irregardless. Right now, we need $40 billion to run this state. As I speak, we are $6.4 million short. So how do we fill the gap? How do we answer this question with pensions not being funded and still take care of our roads and bridges? You know, it's not good when you tell the people, we the people, that the gas tax is going to take care of transportation and roads, and then we get buffaloed again. Because it's not happening. Who's accountable? Now, for the last two administrations, we already had someone go to bat for us, allegedly. I witnessed, he didn't come to Somers to bat for us. This gentleman witnessed, he didn't go to Stafford to bat for him. So, I agree. The odds and the deeds are the same coin with two different sides. Time to consider yours truly. I'm here, I will fight for you, and I know where I speak. It's common sense. It's mathematics. Math doesn't lie. Thank you, and neither will I. God bless.
One of the reasons I ran this time for the office of state representative was that I wanted to tell the truth. And I wanted to have an opportunity to tell people the way things really are, okay? The way they are is this: the state cannot survive without additional sources of revenue. Everybody knows it. As soon as the election is over, the same people who are saying, oh, we can't raise any taxes, they'll be doing it because it's inevitable. I'll give you 4 examples. How are you going to solve the crumbling foundation problem? How about the deteriorating roads and highways? How about the opiate crisis? And how about maintaining quality public higher education without more revenue? It cannot be done. I've developed a plan that has, it's borrowed from other people, not mine, but there are about 10 or 12 sources of income that would be good for the state that we've never even looked at. I only have time to give you 3 examples. Number 1 would be a tax, sales tax on mail order purchases. That would help local communities because it would help the small towns with small businesses that are trying to survive against somebody like Amazon that can flood the market and enable people to avoid paying the sales tax. The second thing is that there was a report issued by a contract standards board that met for 1 year, and they discovered, amazingly, 73% of all the things that the state of Connecticut buys has never been competitively bid. They've never been competitively bid. They're paying prices in the 1990s for electronics that you can do better at going into Best Buy yourself and walking out the door. I think the tolls are inevitable and necessary. Every state from Maine to Florida has them. It's time really to face up to the reality that you've got to find some sources of income that are new. And if you look at the transponder system in Massachusetts, it's safe, it's very quick, and the other benefit of it, of course, is that you can arrange to have a transponder program so that in-state residents will pay less per mile than somebody coming from out of state. Thank you.
Ralph, can I just have a rebuttal for that? You can take it out of my time. I just want to reiterate that Massachusetts, since they've gone over to the gantry system, that they have $15 million of uncollected toll revenue from out-of-state drivers. So think about that.
I'd like to just respond. The DOT study showed that tolls in Connecticut would bring in somewhere between $700 million minimum to $1 billion. If some is not paid, it's probably the inevitable loss in the system. But it's important revenue and we need it.
Okay. Let's move on to another one. On the subject of great interest in the Tolland County area and the surrounding towns, of course, been the problem with home foundations that have, with where the concrete has been contaminated with pyrrhotite, causing significant crumbling. How do you feel about the imposition of a $12 annual surcharge on homeowners insurance to provide a fund to help out those homeowners, beginning with Mr. Madeline Louise now.
Thank you for that question. It's a great one. Number one, when the homes were being built and someone got a certificate of occupancy, that meant that that home was sound. To add insult to injury, when businesses have to be licensed to operate, and the construction company or the concrete company gets a license from the state, why is it that they're not liable? So we have two entities, at the municipal level, certificate of occupancy, at the state level, the licensing. So, all of a sudden, the burden is now put on the people again. We're not only paying our property taxes, and those folks, those homeowners that have the foundation issues, they might get 5 years of a reprieve. What if their average property tax is $5,000? What if their average property tax is $10,000? Well, that's $25,000 to $50,000. My girlfriend, who lives on Reeves Road, goes down Pioneer Heights. She has a little log cabin in her 80s, she and her husband, and they had to pay $150,000 to have that little log cabin lifted and have a new foundation. Now, being in their 80s, they're responsible people. They're from the greatest generation. They don't want to leave the burden with their children. Kudos to them. In the meantime, in between time, it came out of their life savings. That's not half. There's about 1,000 homes in Somers that have that burden, and I think only 69 have revealed it. There are businesses that also have the pyrrhotite problem, and they're not eligible for that tax benefit. But even if they were, $25,000 to $50,000 is not going to pay the bill. Now, I don't understand why everybody in this state has to pay $12 surcharge for something that wasn't done properly with the CO, certificate of occupancy, or the state licensing a company. Does that make sense to anybody in this room? I mean, maybe you want to pay the $12 a month surcharge. Have at it. Well, the insurance company knew that this was coming down the pike, and they've got good lobbyists. So they outsmarted we the people. Here we go again. I mean, I don't know about you folks, but I'm tired of all this looping. And I don't believe we should have to be burdened one more time. That's one more excuse why people are moving out. People will abandon their homes. How can they pay $150,000 when their home is maybe worth $200,000? Add another $150,000, they're not going to get $350,000 for that. So no, I'm not. The state and the town have to be responsible and buck up. But you know, having us be ultimately the bottom line, because we're the town, we're the state, and now we have to pay another $12. It doesn't make any sense to me. So, thank you.
Mr. Walsh?
I would gladly pay $12 to help my friends and neighbors. I think everybody should. What kind of a local community do we have if an emergency of this type, people are not willing to step up? This is the equivalent of wildfires in Connecticut. And it's heartbreaking. You look at the people and what they lost. The insurance companies take your money, your premiums, in order to protect you from risk. But when something happens, you assume the risk. They don't want to pay anything. Something to be looked at very carefully. The only real solution to this is a coalition in which the national government, the state governments, local governments, banks that hold mortgages, insurance companies, and probably the property owners themselves have to come together in some kind, like they did in Canada, in some kind of a coalition to deal with these costs. But in the meantime, I think $12 is a pittance to pay to help your friends. Thank you.
I certainly can speak to this directly as I help push for the $12 surcharge on insurance policies. Was it an option I thought was the best? No, but I thought it was necessary. I've been a strong believer, I'm actually in the insurance field, that the insurance companies should be paying for this. That's what they're designed to do. You know, when you buy a house on the coast, you're putting yourself at more risk for natural disaster. Well, they spread that risk to the rest of us. Okay, they bore the brunt of it, but we all share a little bit in that risk. The insurance companies have not stepped to the plate. I've been going after them for the last 3 years with very little support from at the federal level, at the state level. There's about 3 of us pushing for this, and we pushed a long way. Senator Doyle helped us out just to get us a public hearing so that people could be heard. They changed the language in these policies when they first knew about this in the early 2000s to change the definition of collapse. So if there was any question as to whether it was covered or not, they answered that question when they changed the language. And I submitted a bill to change the language so that it would cover collapse. They said they haven't collected premium for this peril. They've been collecting premium since they stopped paying for it. They didn't lower anybody's premiums. They kept charging the same rate. They need to step to the plate. That would be the best solution. In the meanwhile, banks need to step to the plate. The federal government has done some things with taxes and things like that, but we need FEMA money to help fix some of these homes. This is a natural disaster, the way I look at it. It was born from a natural element. It's deteriorating from the bottom up. There's no easy fix. And as long as I'm here or any of the other candidates, as long as we're elected to this position, we'll be dealing with this issue for years and years to come. And we're right here at ground zero in this district. The state and municipalities are the only ones that have stepped up to the plate. Municipalities with the Capital Region Council of Governments and NECOG, the Northeast Regional Council of Governments, and the state, we started a captive insurance company that's going to pay to actually fix people's foundations. We put $100 million of state money into this fund. And also that $12 surcharge, that money will go into this fund to actually fix people's homes. And I've been appointed to that board by our caucus. Every caucus gets someone of a non-voting ex officio member. But this has been priority number 1 outside of our fiscal problems for us in this district. We're always the forgotten corner of the state, and we got to keep fighting, we got to keep being loud, and we can't let them off the hook. Thank you.
I'd like to respond, please.
I hope all of you know that $12 I'd gladly give. My question is accountability. We already heard our rep say that the gas tax fund that's in a lockbox or a line item has been rated. So that's where TRUST comes in, trust, or lack thereof. Because when they say they're going to give us, we're going to put $12 into a fund, I go with trepidation. I've already been buffaloed one time too many. The $12 is not the issue here. It's the reality. Will the money go where it's supposed to go at the end of the day? Thank you.
I need to rebut. Did you have something?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
When it comes to the talk of $100 million and the $12 and so forth, everybody should be aware that that's a fantasy figure. It can't possibly do any good. They can't even test the people who think they have crumbling foundations with $100 million. I attended a presentation by engineers, experts, who said it would cost $4.5 billion to $5.5 billion to repair those homes. And we heard testimony from people that spent $450,000 on one house in Long Meadow. So these things are fantasy. Anybody who tells you you can do this without additional sources of revenue is putting you on. Thank you.
And I actually agree with that statement. Those figures are used on the high end of the number. They don't know what the scope of the problem is, and that's a big part of this issue as well, because there's 700 people that have filed a report with the Department of Consumer Protection, and there were 34,000 homes that were poured during that time frame in this affected area. So the number lies between 700 and 34,000, and that $4 billion figure is based on the larger number. And And with the captive insurance, how it was set up, it is not a state agency. That's how it was set up that way. It would be separate, and it is run separate, like a separate business, and that money would go directly to that agency. It wouldn't get caught up in the weeds of the state. So, just to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you. Received several questions about state funding for the towns of Somers and Stafford, and I especially come to mind because one of you already referred to the need to rein in bond money. Of course, it was money derived from state bonding that allowed Stafford's Warren Woolen Mill to stay open, that allowed the twisted wreckage of the Somersville Mill to finally be taken down and cleared. What specific efforts would you make on behalf of these two towns, either for specific projects you had in mind or on behalf of the town officials in light of the state's current budget constraints, to make sure that there is money available for those extraordinary needs? I begin with Mr. Walsh.
Local towns can do a lot more than they've been doing to assure the reasonable flow of state funding. That money is going to a lot of places in a lot of special interests that are not as important to us as our own homes and neighborhoods. For example, last week, $500 million worth of new bonding projects, including repairing walking trails and so forth and doing things like that. We have never used the political clout that we could have in this area the way we should have to fight for state aid. You've got to fight. You've got to form a coalition with other legislators from small towns. And what you have to say to the state and to your party leaders is simply this: we can't vote for this budget that cuts us, because if we do, no one will vote for us next time. We've gotten the marching orders from the constituents and the town officials. If we work as a group and we lobby effectively and we work hard, we can preserve the things we have. Taking Somers as an example, this is a beautiful community. Anybody who lives here is damn lucky, by anybody's standards, all over the world. And in Stafford, we have a tight-knit community with a lot of free open space, recreation opportunities, and good schools now, schools that are improving drastically. They're worth fighting. Trail or anything else, and a lot of these other things that are being done. Votes are precious in Hartford today, and a determined group of 20 or 25 state legislators from small towns could successfully get the resources for the communities that we need. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, that comes back to budgetary issues. We certainly want, if there's money available for our communities, we certainly want to go out there and pursue that money. When towns request grants, we do everything in our power to write letters of support, make the appropriate phone calls, and nag people if we have to get that grant money back to our community. Well, our state has been in a little bit of a fiscal crisis, so there's not as much of that money going around. And, you know, since I've been in office, we're able to secure a $500,000 steep grant to help us take sewer from Dunkin' Donuts up to the new senior complex. We helped get the groundfill money to clean up the mill here in Somers. I helped get money to help make the police station here in Somers handicap accessible, so on and so forth. But we have to be a little bit more diligent about the amount of bonding and grant money we're giving out. You know, when times are tough, you've got to tighten those bootstraps a little bit. Governor Malloy on his way out, like David said, you know, $500 million. You know, it's like his going away present or something, you know. And you mentioned one is with splash pads in New Haven, because that's a priority right now. You know, so, you know, it's just, you got to reel it in. You certainly want to go out there. If there's money available, we want to get our share, but at the same time, we need to be fiscally responsible in what's best for the state in general, not just our own pet projects. Thank you.
Let's face it, folks. We have sanctuary cities in the state. I had a meeting last Saturday with one of my groups, and I had to go to Walmart, and I'm in the line, and this woman with her gold and her nails and her lover and this, that, and the other thing, her $100 sneakers, paying for her lobster, et cetera, with her EBT cards. I don't know what's going on with that situation, but I know this. In Massachusetts, what happened was the Attorney General Sessions came in July, applauded Massachusetts because of Maria and the Puerto Rican families that had come up here for refuge. Their names and identities were stolen for 25, 30 years. So when they went to go get a place to live, somebody else had stolen their name. 25 of those people on the list, one of them was a murderer. They were all illegal aliens from some other nation. So we have these sanctuary cities that are costing Hartford, New Haven, and Bridgeport big money. I don't know about you, but my whole life is about charity. That's all I do. Ask my husband. He wishes I'd bring more money into the household, but I'm a very charitable person, and he lets me be charitable. We have to rein this indiscretion in. If we don't, and our leaders don't, our leaders know that we have these things going on, and everyone's quiet about it. $2.7 million didn't come in from the federal government. Connecticut Mirror, July 19, 2018. Read the article. So we have to rein it in. Where I come from, when the fish doesn't smell good, it starts at the head. So our head leaders need to know what to do and make it happen. Thank you.
Now, behind all the questions of pensions, infrastructure, state grants, comes the question of the condition of the state's economy. With as little amount of rose-colored glasses as possible, what do you think the prospects are for the state's economy for the next few years, and how would you structure state financing and taxation in a way that would promote rather than discourage economic growth within the state? Beginning with, what are we up to by now? Mr. Walsh.
Excuse me, Mr. Moderator, can I just ask how much time I have left?
You're at 7:31.
Used or left?
You've used 7:31 seconds.
Oh, good, okay, thank you.
Let the rest of us know the bottom
Yeah, if we
line.
could just find that out, that would be great.
Who's my moderator?
Kasia, you've used 10 minutes and 26 seconds.
And you have used 11 minutes and 39 seconds.
I'm very upbeat on the Connecticut economy, and I think we've already turned the corner. I think you could see in the third quarter of 2017 increasingly strong economic figures. The gross state product increased, unemployment began to decline, we began to find new companies coming to Connecticut, big ones, Infosys, Federal Express, Amazon, the technological development that's going to be made at in West Hartford at the old UConn campus. These will produce 100,000 jobs overall, and many of those jobs will be high paying. This is the richest state and the richest country in the world. We still have the benefits we had before the Great Recession. We're still located between Boston and Washington. We still have one of the most educated populations in the world. We still get the third highest amount of dollars per defense contracts in the United States. And basically we have 19 Fortune 500 companies located in one state. One of the things that's hurt us the most lately is the negativism and the campaign to try to terrify people and make them afraid. You know, the economy's falling down, Connecticut's crumbling, it's collapsing, all of these things. Those are terms that have been used over and over again by the same groups of people, basically Republican conservatives in Florida, Wisconsin, Indiana. Take any of the studies there, these people are repeating the same things that were said at that time. And that had a very negative effect on Connecticut. A lot of people were afraid to buy things. Some people were so afraid they left. Other people thought, well, I better not make any moves now. I better not try to open a business or expand or do anything like that. The bottom line is, the statistics are undeniable, and so is the public opinion polling, which shows more and more confidence in the Connecticut economy. If you look at the second half of 17 and into 2018, unless you're making it up, it's undeniable that the Connecticut economy is starting to pick up. And you look at the profit rates of some companies like UTC, Electric Boat, they're very large. Good companies are coming. The state still has a strong infrastructure in terms of people who are educated, And if we just show confidence in one another, we'll do okay. Thank you.
No, thank you. You know, I've been there when my first years when GE left, that was in 2015, and their biggest complaint, and they came and talked to us all individually and said, we need predictability. That's a common theme I hear, whether it's from town leaders, business leaders, with our concept, our bond rating in Connecticut is very poor because we borrow too much money and we don't pay it all back, and that affects businesses' confidence in doing business here. We're constantly in deficit because we're spending too much money. And, you know, my opponent mentioned, you know, Republicans. This state hasn't been run by Republicans since I've been alive fully. They had the House and Senate in the 80s for a 2-year period, and they had the Senate for 2 years in the 90s. And we've never, even when they had that, they had a Democratic governor. And so those are the facts. And there's a lot of people that want to change the structure of taxes, making things more simple, getting rid of fees and regulations to make things business friendly. I've talked to many businesses here in this district, and that's what they're talking about. They want to stay here. We have a great workforce here. We have ingenuity. But the cost of doing business here is just too high, and they can't help it. They're moving to Massachusetts. Now that's pathetic. You know, if they're going to Massachusetts to save money on taxes, where have we come? That's always been known as Taxachusetts. So I just think, again, the key is predictability. We need to start paying down our debt. We need to stop borrowing so much money, and we need to make it easier for people to conduct business in this state and cut out the red tape and all the process it takes to run a business here in the state.
Thank you. Yes, in the last couple of years, Connecticut taxpayers have endured the largest tax hike in history, with 77 tax and fee increases averaging more than $1,200 per taxpayer per year. Okay? Now, this gal, Laurie Pelletier, she said to Scott Shepard on the radio the other day that what she would suggest is that we have more people come into the government jobs, so that they can regulate businesses in a state that's already highly regulated. And she said that regulation and having those business people pay their fees and their fines, that's a government profit center, quote unquote. So I agree with the incumbent that we have to be done with this. If we're not going to be friendly with businesses, we are going down. I don't know if you can get any lower than 50 on the 50 states, but all things considered, I just called the Yankee Institute before I came here tonight, and because of the unfunded pension liabilities, we are $70 billion behind. Now we need $40 billion to get this state rocket and rolling year by year. So this is a train wreck. So as much as I'd like to celebrate the 4.2 uptick that we had in the latest, between April and June, we had a 4.2 uptick in growth in jobs. And still, we're at the bottom of the barrel. So in 2 election cycles later, here we are. We're still at the bottom, even though we had an uptick in job creation. That's the truth, folks. Math doesn't lie. Thank you.
I've spent the last 2 years meeting with an economics group every other week and interviewing people in business and high office positions in the state of Connecticut. And I want to make 3 things clear. Number 1, the corporation tax in Connecticut in 2000 was 18% of the total tax receipts. You know what it was last year? 5%. It fell from 18 to 5. Okay? When people talk about the Democrats being responsible for all this, they seem to have forgotten Governor Rowland and Governor Rell. Governor Rell left the state with a hidden deficit that's only now being paid off. And we all know what John Rowland did. Together, the two of those people instituted 4 of the 5 early retirement programs for state employees. Each one of those added immediately $100 million to the state debt, and it increased every year after that. Every business wants to pay less taxes. Look at the returns they're reporting, profits. 43% profit for UTC in 1 quarter. Look at the profits, look at the salaries that people are being paid in the high positions in corporations. Believe me, this state is on good footing. We do have strong businesses. We do have all of the things that would be necessary for economic success. Right now, a very vicious political game is being played between 2 groups that are trying to blame each other for what's going wrong. Once that's eliminated and we begin to think about how to solve problems, we will move forward. Every single statistic indicates that over the last year and a half.
I just, again, wanted to point out, governors don't pass laws, legislatures do. And governors influence, they submit proposals, they can submit bills. Ultimately, they have a lot of power, veto power, persuasion, things like that. And I agree with my opponent. I think both of the previous governors have a lot to do in this blame as well, kicking the can down the road, making long-term contracts that go out. Governor Malloy just made a CBAC agreement that goes out all the way to 2027, and tied the hands of the legislature in the process. And so, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought, so I'm going to let it go.
I'd just like to share that policy, not politics, is responsible for economic growth. So if the policies aren't in sync with business and families and our elderly, then it's the policy, not the politics. And that being said, there are 2 things that never change: human nature and government. So we're caught between a rock and a hard place. And I agree, truth will set us free, but the truth is that with all of the success of a few companies, we're still in a bind. Thank you.
I thought it might, can I finish now, please? Oh, sorry, go ahead. Maybe there's a few big corporations that are doing well, but our small businesses aren't. I mean, they're not having a 42% profit rate, and those are the people we talk to on a daily basis, whether it's contractors, again, retail stores, small business retail stores. It's a struggle because we try to put we implement some of these things because maybe our corporate businesses don't treat their employees as well as we'd like, but our local businesses do. And sometimes they get caught up in the process of trying to make things better for the big corporations, and the government's done things to make it more difficult for them to be profitable.
Thank you.
When you look at studies written by really sophisticated economists, they're going to tell you that the cost of doing business has to be weighed against the potential for profit. And given the fact that this state has the highest per capita income, and given the fact that we have so many subcontractors operating in very affluent areas, they're willing to bear that extra cost because it's worth it in terms of the profits they will reap. And just one other question, one other point I'd like to make. One of the things we could do to help small businesses, which is always resisted in Hartford, is to allow people with small businesses to buy, for their employees, to buy into the state health plan. And United Insurance Company has already said that they would be in favor of that. It would drive down prices, more people would get better medical benefits, and it would be one way of relieving a serious burden on a lot of small businesses. But it's tied up in politics in Hartford, and they don't want to let it happen. Thank you.
Now I got to respond to that.
Then can we move on?
Yes, we can.
I hope.
That sounds great. Insurance always works better when you have larger pools of money, but with that becomes more state employees, more benefits to pay out, and more government. So that's part of the problem. Maybe we can find a way that can be done, outside of the state government, but we need to look at ways to make it smaller, not bigger. Thank you.
Okay, I can move on now. 52nd House District is practically Connecticut's sportsman's paradise. We've got probably as many sportsmen's groups, hunting groups, and whatnot. Gun ownership has always been relatively high. Of course, also high these days is concern about personal safety, particularly people in large crowds in schools and institutions. It's not just Sandy Hook, it's or Parkland, it's Las Vegas and the like. I'd like to ask each of you what legislative initiatives you would favor that would promote personal safety, especially for our children, at the same time as assuring that there's sensible protection for the rights of gun owners. Mr. Vail.
Thank you. I think one of the first and foremost things that we need to do is, I'm a firm believer in school resource officers. Having them in school, my daughter went to an elementary school where there was a police officer there every day to greet them, and it wasn't an intimidating thing. He had shorts on. He was very proactive with the kids. They knew him by his first name. It was comfort. It gave the parents comfort in knowing he was there. He was trained. He was integrated into the school. Now, as I like that personally, I think that's a great idea, and think that our community should look into that. I want to, I supported, a legislation that would have grant money to help people, to help schools and communities that want to engage in this, to help pay for that school security officer. I think that's first and foremost thing I think needs to be done. But again, I wouldn't want to mandate that on the towns. I believe that the town of Somers and the town of Stafford and their school board and their board of selectmen, they can decide what's best for them in this town. And I want to support them and just maybe give them the opportunity to have that grant money available if they chose to go that direction. Thank you.
Mrs. LaCosse.
I am not, my husband being a military man, I asked him that question, how do we protect our school campuses? And he said, like you would protect a military base. You'd have someone at a gate, you would know who comes in and who goes out. We already recognize the school resource officer in Florida who didn't go in when the shooting took place. The children may know the school resource officer and they may be good buddies, but it's not the children that are shooting down the schools. So I believe there's a better way to approach this, and I think it's a sense of pseudo-security, thinking that a resource officer in his shorts that has a good relationship with the children is going to save them when the gunman comes in. It doesn't make any sense to me. So there are better ways, and security would be one of them. Just like when I went to the state court, they have worn me down. When I go to the LOB, I get worn down. When I go to the airport, I get worn down. So preventing them from coming on the campus, that would be a good idea. Thank you.
Mr. Welch.
I support the Second Amendment. Obviously, it's part of the Constitution. It's part of American culture. But I'd never be able to equal Representative Vail in this area because he's an NRA A+, which is a very rare ranking. I would be somewhere probably in the B or B- range. I think two things are obvious here. One is that sportsmen, legitimate people who want to defend their homes should be able to have firearms. I have a rifle in my own house that I would use for defense if I needed to. Fortunately, I have never had to. But beyond that, I don't favor anything like bump stocks or anything like that that would artificially increase the rate of fire of a firearm. It's too dangerous for policemen, and it's not what they're intended for. But the real problem here is the link between probably mental illness, which seems to be rising rapidly in our society, and the use of guns. So the only way I can see that would be serious, that would make a serious improvement, would be to have the most rigid possible, which we do have here in this state, rigid possible registration requirements. People's backgrounds would have to be checked much more carefully than they are now. And you would have to be sure that people like the perpetrators we're reading about who, spent their whole life building up giant arsenals, or somebody who lived in the same house with his mother but answered all the questions to her by email in the same house for 6 months. Those kinds of people should not be given firearms. They should not be allowed to practice with firearms. It's just too dangerous. But we haven't come to grips with the fact that there's a lot of pressure in American society today. You talk to anybody and they'll tell you farmers and people who've lost their jobs and people with crumbling foundations. It's a lot of pressure. If someone is going to be given a license to carry a firearm, they've got to be carefully screened before that takes place.
Just for my own guidance, how are we doing on time, so I can figure out how many questions I'm going to line up here for your candidates?
Mr. Vail has 16 minutes, or you have used 16 minutes and 56 seconds.
Okay.
Mr. Walsh has used 14 minutes and 4 seconds.
And,
Mr. Coffey used 14 minutes, 9 seconds.
okay, all right. Proceed from there. And one development recently that's gotten a lot of attention in the neighboring state of Massachusetts has been the legalization of recreational marijuana. And it's been proposed in this state not simply as a personal liberty issue, but of course as a possible tax benefit. How do you feel about that idea?
Well, I speak with authority. My family, the pictures down there, they all live in Colorado, and our son owns a hemp farm. Hemp is one of those industries where we can make clothes and all kinds of wonderful things, and was banned for years in the United States. So I'm glad hemp is coming back. I've never smoked marijuana. I've never smoked cigarettes, and I'm a health nut. So, you know, but I understand the value of CBD oil. My friends have neuropathy and real bad issues with pain, and I am grateful that they have relief. So I'm a practical woman. When it comes to recreation marijuana, one of the reasons why I don't go to Colorado is because of recreation marijuana. There's a lot of deaths that results. As a matter of fact, Alaska took it off the docket. I don't know if they put it back on since everyone's getting high. I think it numbs who we are. We're not alert. We want to just chill out and have something to eat. Now, if that's your bag, hey, have at it. I don't like regulations. So, and I believe in the sovereignty of states, and I believe it's not a federal issue. I believe Connecticut, we the people should make that decision if it's your decision. And yes, Colorado is making all kinds of money. Look at the math. I can't deny it. Is it worth the risk? That's up to we the people. God bless you. Thank you.
I'm still influenced by the movie Reefer Madness. No, I'm only kidding. The time has come for the legalization of marijuana under certain conditions where it's, of course, legalized and regulated by the state. Like anything else, it can create conditions where a person becomes inebriated and unable to perform. We have someone here with us tonight, Penny Bacchiacchi, who was formerly a representative in this district, who was one of the pioneers in medicinal uses of marijuana. There's no question it's had enormous gains. But I think the time has come when the society is mature enough and enough people are using these things that they should be legalized.
I have no real strong opinion on this one way or other. I have polled my constituents every year I've been in office, and it's usually about 55, it's been about 55% in favor, 45% opposed, and it's getting higher now. It's about 60-40. And the thing is that the ones that are in favor of it, except for people that are real big advocates for it, are just kind of, yeah, you know, whatever, you can legalize it, that's fine. But the 40 to 45% that are opposed to it are vehemently opposed to it. And some of the reasons are there are studies that say a child's mind doesn't finish developing until they're 25 years old. If someone were intoxicated, there's no method like there is for alcohol to test their blood alcohol level, what it would be the equivalent for someone that was too high to drive. So I'm certainly not opposed to the concept, but I think before we do it, I'm not comfortable I haven't had enough of my questions answered yet, and it hasn't come to a vote on the House floor. So I would probably hold if we got to the point, I'd probably hold a public forum like this, bring in experts from both sides of the issue, and really reach out to the constituents to see, where they fall in this. But I wouldn't be comfortable voting yes now, but I would keep an open mind if I could be convinced that those things could happen, that I would do that in the future.
Thank you. There have been various proposals in recent years to restructure the education cost-sharing formula. In particular, the fact that some of the richest towns in the state, which happen to be some of the richest towns in the nation, still get a sizable grant under various hold harmless formulas. Do you have any thoughts about how or whether education cost sharing should be rearranged, and how what priorities you think that are undervalued now might be brought to a higher level in determining how much a town needs?
Who's up?
Well, the current system of economic cost sharing, the one we have now, began in 1989, and it's been tweaked a few times. And of course, before that, there was another one, the Education Equalization Grants, which was 20 years in duration. They're always changing these things from time to time, but they're vitally important. Comparative studies of all 50 states show that in the United States, Connecticut is the fourth most equitable state in terms of the distribution of education funds. So we're not doing a bad job with what we have now. I think if there is to be reductions, it should take place in communities that are very affluent, where students can get the same opportunities that others need at school, in the private sector, you know, everything from recreation to advanced tutoring and so forth. But I would be very careful with this. I, in my own mind, have seen the tremendous progress made in the Stafford and Somers schools. I would fight to preserve the existing formula as it is now. Thank you.
There was a court ruling by a judge that said that Connecticut needs to figure out a formula that they can use so that municipalities would have a better understanding of what they have coming in. So there was supposed to be a group to get together and establish that, and I think it needs to happen. They need a set formula. What that formula is, I mean, that's, you know, leave the experts to figure that out. But the fact if you have special needs students in your district or different poverty issues in your district, those things need to be factored in. But we need a set formula. There's not a set formula. And the governor, whomever it may be, has at their discretion the ability not to give those funds. And we submitted a bill, House Bill 5171 this year, that would take away the governor's right to take away money from the ECS program, education cost sharing. I think if we have set guidelines, and we pass our budget in June, most municipalities are voting on their budget before we pass ours. So when we get into a crisis situation and they're left holding the bag, if we have a set formula that they can count on based on students that are in their district, then they will be able to calculate the money they can expect to get from the state. And as long as the state or the governor doesn't have the ability to take that money back, there's predictability. And that's a point, I'm down to a minute. I'm going to finish with this one, because...
that's time out?
Oh, it's time out? Oh. All right.
I thought you were going to hold that when there was 1 minute left.
Was that 1 minute? I'm out.
Okay. The other two?
Mr. Ross is at 15 minutes and 41 seconds. 15? Still has 5 minutes? Yep.
This cost, you 15 minutes, 38 seconds.
Okay. Okay, well, moving along on education cost sharing, to you? No, I know.
I'm an advocate of vouchers. One of our children went to Wilbraham Munson Academy. I know a lot of homeschool people, and there's a difference between charter schools and magnet schools. We have a lot of people in this town, maybe 29 students, that are blessed to go to a charter school. So our taxpayers in this town, we pay $7,000 per student approximately, and we contribute to that education. They get an exemplary education. Not all people are created equally when it comes to their skill set. I'm a real advocate of Cheney Tech and learning skill sets like being an electrician, a plumber, a hairdresser. My husband's a barber. I love hands-on, and I love giving children that opportunity. I was telling my own students Tuesday night, I teach faith formation, and I was telling them that when I was in the 5th grade, we had home economics. We had shop in the 5th grade. After that class, I had an apron that I knew how to make, and I could take it home and give it to my mother as a gift. A lot of people need to learn how to make things happen, and these skill sets are desperate for more workers. So that's my take on education. And when it comes to cost sharing, I believe we all should take an active interest in understanding what families need so that kids do the best for their children. My opponent, his children, I believe, go to Catholic schools. So, you know, all things aren't created equal when it comes to teaching a child. Thank you.
I'd like to add one thing.
Okay.
I was appointed to the Long Range Planning Commission on Higher Education by the Speaker of the House, and for 2 years we met and talked about education, not only at the higher levels, but also the feeder system, pre-K through 12. And Ben Barnes, who was the director of the Office of Policy and Management, came out one day, it's on C-SPAN, and he said people in education are always whining about not getting enough money. They're always complaining that they're underfunded and so forth. And I think what he missed there, and I asked him why he said that, because in the university I taught him, we went from 75% state funding down to 25% state 45% state funding in 25 years. And I asked him, why do you say that? And he said, because we have new priorities. I would be very careful in any changes that are being suggested in Hartford to change that formula now. Because what they're going to mean, what they're going to be all about is taking money from the kids and from education and using it somewhere else. And I think in my own life, nothing was as transformational or important to me as education. I thank everybody that ever taught me from the time I was in first grade till I was a PhD graduate. And I would always urge that, I would always suggest that the key to success in any society is a strong education system. And not everybody agrees with that anymore. Some people would say transportation is more important, or infrastructure anymore, but since the beginning of time, education in my mind is always ranked as number one. Thank you.
I'm in sort of an awkward position as your moderator, which is I'm reluctant to pose questions to only 2 candidates on the subjects that are remaining. I think the ground rules were understood, and I think they were fine as far as they went. But I feel odd about it, allowing only Mrs. Lacasse and Mr. Walsh to speak going forward. So unless I hear loud screams, I'm going to propose that we go to closing remarks.
Now, just a minute. I was hoping to use my remaining time to insult the other 2 candidates.
All right then. So, can I remember who the first person was that spoke last time? Okay. So 3 minutes.
Thank you. You're going to have an important decision to make in November. In addition to electing a new governor, you also have to decide who will be your state representative. Here are a few reasons why I hope I continue to be your choice. I am the fiscally conservative choice. I don't believe in raising taxes and implementing tolls to fix out-of-control spending. I have a proven record of voting for fiscally conservative budgets. I want to cut taxes, which can only be achieved by reducing spending. I work to make the state more business-friendly. My efforts have been recognized by the 2 largest business and industry associations in the state have endorsed me. These endorsements made after looking at real work and accomplishments, not based on questionnaires I filled out. I am pro-Constitution. I support the Second Amendment and the rights of law-abiding citizens. I do not support taxpayer giveaways to large and wealthy corporations. I do not support funding formulas that punish well-managed towns like Stafford and Somers and reward poorly managed cities. I will work with local officials to make sure that they get the predictability they need by passing timely budgets with solid formulas in place. I have been a leader on the issue of crumbling foundations, standing up to large insurance companies and advocating on behalf of victims is my #1 priority, and that work needs to continue. I have fought to cut red tape and streamline processes, work that I'm especially looking forward to with the new administration. In my 4 years as state rep, I have a 100% voting record. I also attend all public hearings and stay until the very end. When there's only 2 or 3 representatives left in that meeting, I'm always one of them. I've built relationships across the aisle, and I've used those relationships to get real work done. And finally, as I stated in my opening, I went into this position without an agenda. I only wanted to help the towns and the people I represent. I can say that I am still that same person, just more experienced and much more effective. I am honest, sincere, and direct. I have a reputation in Hartford of being a consensus builder, but also a tough negotiator when needed. While I work hard raising my children, working as a football coach, and working as a business person, my true passion and commitment is to Stafford and Somers. And I hope that I can again earn your vote in November. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McCown?
I'm two,
You're two.
so I...
Okay, I thought we were doing round
Oh,
robin.
you wanna
Go,
go
go. Here's your chance for your insults.
Okay. I would like to begin where I started. I believe that politics really should involve problem solving. There's a competitive element, choosing the problems to focus on. But I see too little cooperation today and too many people playing a partisan game. Also, there are too many people who are concerned about their own careers. Somehow the job in Hartford becomes disconnected from the job in our communities. You get elected here, but you go off there and you deal with the particular dynamics of Hartford politics without ever thinking about what does it mean for the people back home. In the last presidential election, people asked a question, President Trump asked the question, what have you got to lose? Well, I would tell everybody in this district that you have a lot to lose. We have a high standard of living here, really good quality of life, safety, environmental protection, open spaces, good schools, recreational opportunities. Those things are worth fighting for. And they're under attack because resources are limited and therefore other, of course, groups, cities, and everything else you could imagine. People want underground expressways and around Hartford and so forth. They're going to compete for that money, and it's not safe anymore. What is needed is a new kind of state representative. Somebody who's going to be a team player, consider himself part or an extension of the local administration of the town. You also need somebody who can listen to lobbyists and learn from them, but you also need a person who can independently evaluate the validity of their claims. How much of it that they're telling you is true and how much of it is self-interest. I think you also need somebody who's going to constantly communicate with local governments. And the only reason, the only motivation for that is the love of politics and the respect you have for the fact that you're elected. The representative should work with the local administration like he's a member of it, like he works for the towns. And I think we haven't seen enough of that lately. Finally, you have to have some kind of mobilizing skills or experience in getting people together to form coalitions to defend the interests of our towns. And I think that my whole life has prepared me for this. That's what I studied for, that's what I taught about, that's what I acted on, and if I'm elected, I will be, I believe, the hardest working state representative you've ever had. I will be accountable to everybody, and I'll do my very best to provide an independent evaluation of what's going on in Hartford. Thank you.
A is approachable and available and accountable. B is a bridge builder. C is the Constitution of Connecticut. We're the Constitution state. Each time I'm with my students, we do a prayer, God before country. We pledge allegiance to the flag, one nation under God. And we do the preamble to the Constitution. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, secure the blessings of liberty for ourselves and our posterity. I was teaching my students, posterity is our future. We ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States of America. And I will work with you with passion and purpose. I will work with you. I am not going to give up on this district or this town. I love bringing people together. It is my life. And I'm a problem solver. And I have common sense ideas. And I am steadfast. And I do get to the finish line. I might be one of those special needs people, but I get to the finish line. So when it comes to the issues that we are struggling with today, it is my hope that you will vote for Linda Louise Lacoste. And before I end, I want to say thank you to my beloved husband, who's been very devoted to me and very supportive. I want to say thank you to my campaign manager, Kim Grant, who has been an amazing guide for me. And most of all, the last shall be the first in the kingdom of God. I want to thank everyone in this room for coming here tonight, because you have proved that government is local, and you took the time to see what's going on among the three of us. We're very different people, we have different approaches, but in the Word of God it says no man can be trusted, but it does say that you can be entrusted. So I'm asking you to entrust me with this job. It will be full time. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
I want to thank all three of the candidates for coming tonight. I want to thank the audience for their thoughtful questions. I'm sorry I did not get to more of them. I tried to distill and merge some of the questions to hope that we would have time. I wish you all a good evening.
Ladies and gentlemen, there will be another debate in October.